Imagine a civilization so vast, so feared, that its rulers believed they were chosen directly by the gods. A world where kings could marry their own sisters without shame, where men owned hundreds of wives as symbols of strength, and where the slightest mistake in front of the throne could mean a lifetime of torture or instant death. This was ancient Persia, the empire of divine rulers, glittering palaces, and sacred cruelty. A land where power had no limits, and morality had no voice. But beneath the gold and glory lay rituals and beliefs that would make even the cruelest kings of other civilizations tremble. What you're about to hear will not only shock you, it will make you question what humans are willing to do in the name of faith and power. So sit tight, because the story of Persia isn't just history, it's a warning whispered through the ruins of time. The empire that defied the gods. It all began around 550 BC, when a man named Cyrus the Great forged one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Persia stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the edges of India, ruling over more than 50 million souls, an empire of deserts, mountains, and endless ambition. To maintain control over such vast lands, Persia relied on two forces: fear and faith. Its rulers were seen not as men, but as living gods. Their word was divine law, and questioning it was the same as defying heaven itself. It was a world where loyalty was demanded, not requested, where justice was absolute and mercy was weakness. But beneath that perfect order, something darker thrived: traditions that blurred the line between holiness and horror. The forbidden marriage celebrated as divine. Among these customs, one stands above all for its audacity: the sacred marriage between siblings. For the royal bloodline, marrying within the family wasn't sin, it was salvation. They believed divine purity flowed only through their veins, and that mixing with the common people would taint the essence of their God-given right to rule. So kings and queens became husband and wife. Brothers claimed their sisters, and fathers even arranged unions between their own children. The court celebrated these weddings with festivals and blessings from the priests, who declared them holy bonds of divine continuity. Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus, married two of his sisters. And far from being condemned, he was praised for it. Priests of the Zoroastrian faith called it an act of piety, a divine ritual that honored the gods and preserved the sacred blood of the empire. The children born of these marriages were revered as sons of the sun, destined to rule over mortals. But the truth behind the palace walls was far more tragic. Generations of inbreeding left scars that no crown could hide: kings born with twisted limbs, heirs consumed by madness, and rulers who believed themselves immortal. Ancient records mention princes who screamed at the voices of invisible gods, and queens who vanished into insanity. Yet every affliction was explained away by the priests. The gods are testing their chosen, and so the cycle of divine delusion continued. Until Alexander the Great brought his armies from the west and tore the illusion apart with fire and steel. The harem of power, love, death, and ambition. But the darkness of Persia wasn't confined to the throne room. It pulsed through every corridor of the royal palaces. In Persia, a man's status was not just measured by his wealth or victories, but by the number of wives he commanded. Polygamy wasn't a luxury, it was proof of divine favor. The harems of the Persian kings were empires of their own. The harem of King Xerxes. I housed more than 300 wives, each living in her own suite, surrounded by servants, guards, and slaves. From the outside, these places shimmered like paradise, filled with music, fragrance, and silks that glowed under the torchlight. But inside, the air was heavy with jealousy and death. Each woman fought to be seen, to be chosen, to be remembered. A single night with the king could mean power, fortune, or fatal envy. The one who bore the king a male heir rose to unthinkable influence. She became the queen mother. Her words could decide wars. Her whispers could order executions. Others, less fortunate, met quieter ends: poisoned cups, strangled servants, or silent disappearances into the cold corridors of the palace. For the young princes raised within these walls, childhood was a nightmare. Every brother was an enemy, every glance a threat. They were taught that love was weakness, that trust was suicide. And when they became rulers, they carried those lessons with them, turning paranoia into law, cruelty into order, and power into religion. The law without compassion. Beyond the marble palaces, the same merciless logic ruled everyday life. Persian justice was not designed to be fair. It was designed to be feared. Punishments were brutal, public, and absolute. A careless word against the king could lead to mutilation or impalement. There were no second chances. For women, the reality was even more terrifying. In the eyes of the law, a woman was not a person. She was property. She could be sold, traded, beaten, or executed by her husband's command, and the state would not interfere. Her only sacred duty was to bear sons. If she failed, she was discarded like a broken tool, replaced by someone younger, someone fertile, someone favored by the gods. Those who outlived their usefulness often became servants to the new wives, forever trapped within the same golden prison that once promised them glory. It was a world built by men, for men, and maintained by fear, strong enough to silence even the thought of rebellion. They feared that a corpse would pollute the sacred elements, earth, fire, and water. So they turned to the sky. They built enormous stone structures called towers of silence on the peaks of mountains, where the dead were carried by priests and left exposed to the blazing sun. There the vultures descended, a grisly ritual of cleansing. The birds devoured the flesh until only bones remained, gleaming white under the desert heat. Families were required to watch in silence. If the vultures refused to touch the corpse, it meant the gods had rejected the soul. That omen cursed the entire bloodline. Neighbors avoided them, friends turned away, and priests demanded wealth to perform purification ceremonies. Fear became faith, and faith became business. The Tower of Silence stood as a grim monument to the empire's obsession with purity, a place where even in death the poor were shamed and the powerful bought redemption. The obsession with purity, the untouchable king. This obsession extended to the living god himself, the Persian king. No ordinary human could touch him, not even the doctors charged with preserving his life. They were forced to diagnose him from a distance, relying on what they could see, never what they could feel. When the king bathed, the water had to be drawn from distant sacred springs. The journey could take weeks. If one seal was broken on the urns, the entire expedition began again. He would rather wait dirty and uncomfortable than risk divine contamination. The royal chefs lived as prisoners, confined for life inside the palace kitchens. They could never leave or speak to outsiders, their only duty to prepare food that no poison could touch. Every meal required days of inspection. Every ingredient was dissected, tested, purified. If anything seemed uncertain, the whole supply was destroyed. While peasants starved in the streets, tons of grain and meat were burned in the name of the king's safety. For the ruler was not seen as human. He was the sun itself, and nothing impure could reach him. The Golden Empire's fall. The Persian elite lived in a world untouched by suffering. They believed their divine blood would shield them forever. Their temples would stand eternal, their laws unbreakable, but pride is the seed of ruin. When Alexander the Great invaded in 330 BC, he found an empire collapsing under its own arrogance. The soldiers fought without spirit, the nobles without unity. Their faith in divine protection blinded them to reality. The gods they trusted stayed silent, and within months, Persia, the colossus of the ancient world, fell. Palaces burned, temples crumbled, the towers of silence filled with unburied bones, and the once immortal bloodline of kings vanished beneath the sand. Echoes of a dark legacy. Today, travelers who walk among the ruins of Persepolis see only stone, cold, cracked, and silent. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes, the cries of servants, the prayers of queens, the whispers of kings who thought themselves divine. Ancient Persia reminds us that civilization and barbarism are not opposites. They often exist side by side, feeding one another. A nation can build wonders of beauty and commit horrors beyond imagination in the same breath. That is the legacy of Persia, an empire that reached for eternity and was destroyed by its own hands. Because in the end, absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it consumes. If this journey into forbidden history shook you, leave a like, subscribe, and prepare for the next story, because what comes next will be even darker. History, when told without filters, never sounds the same again. Empires rise, kings fall. But the thirst for power, that never dies. What ancient Persia did in the name of faith and control still echoes through time, a reminder that when humans play gods, it always ends in ruin. If this story made you see history in a new light, don't let it fade away. Hit that like button, share this video with those who love forgotten truths, and subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. The past still has secrets, and we're here to uncover every one of them. This is History Unveiled, where truth is darker than legend.